Hey folks, hope you're having a fantastic day where you are happier, healthier, harder to kill. This is Coach Johnson from IYC Coaching. Today I'm going to talk a bit about my philosophy on teaching children martial arts. Really teaching them anything, but specifically martial arts, and that's what I work with kids mostly on. And I have a very simple philosophy that I'm going to share with you. Now, I need to do two things. First, I'm going to tell you a little bit of my history about my experience with parents and kids. I'm going to tell you some of the approaches that other people in the martial arts world take. And I'll show you my philosophy. So over the years, the last 30 years or so, I've been teaching martial arts. Many times parents come to me and they go, hey, coach, or Mr. Johnson, my kid, he doesn't listen very well, or she's not very coordinated, or she's not athletic, or he's not strong. and they will almost always preface their kids' training with their shortcomings. And I get that. I'm a parent, so I guess you want to limit the expectations so your kid doesn't disappoint. I get that, but that's not an important thing. You'll see why in a minute. Now, so this is often very, parents come to me, they list their kids' shortcomings before they talk about what they want to achieve. And of course, I ask them, well, what do you want to achieve with your son or your daughter? Focus, discipline, fitness, self-defense, whatever it is. So the other thing that happens is I started teaching kids in the early 90s. And that was when the movement really started. That's when kids martial arts really started becoming a big thing. Now, before that, there was a Karate Kid in the mid 80s, and it kind of hit the martial arts world in the face because up until that time, really there wasn't anybody teaching martial arts to children generally. It was kind of an adult thing, and it was not really a big industry. I mean, there were some schools that did well, but the idea of teaching lots of children martial arts was very unusual. And what happened is they would basically take the adult curriculum and they would just kind of transpose it onto the kids' classes, teaching the same method. And that's good and bad. It sets expectations quite high. However, oftentimes kids learn in a little bit different way. And that led to a movement, I don't know if movement's the right word, but a direction where all of a sudden the kids' martial arts training became a extraordinarily watered down version of what the adults were doing. Maybe the curriculum was completely different, or maybe they moved at a slower pace, or maybe they just did a snippet of what the adults did, and it all worked the same. Obviously kids learn at a different pace, especially the younger kids. I'd say below the age of 8 or 9, 10, 11, 12s. That's where they their brain starts kind of like catching up emotionally. Mentally. But what it really did is it led to a huge wave of what I call the participation trophy era. And if you guys, anybody who's had children or worked with kids from the 90s through even modern day, knows exactly what I'm talking about. If you were a child and you were doing activities in, let's say, the 80s or 70s, pretty much you either did it well or you didn't get any recognition or awards. And so that led to a lot of kids to be disappointed. Some of them dropped out, et cetera, et cetera. With martial arts, the challenge of trying to get kids to do an adult curriculum caused the same kind of issues. Many kids weren't able to handle it. They dropped out. The kids weren't having fun. So, they just didn't stick with it. Now, kids are, even if they're emotionally or mentally capable of learning the concepts that you are teaching, the primary method by which kids learn is by playful behavior. And that's just the way it is. And honestly, adults learn that way pretty well too. But getting back the participation trophy issue is it spawned a movement where kids martial arts turned into a kind of a crap fest, where there was no real martial arts taught. Every kid was number one, and they got badges and stickers and stripes for inhaling oxygen and exhaling carbon dioxide. And it's basically, in my opinion, the pendulum swung too far. They went from making the curriculum too difficult for kids to do it en masse to where it was so ridiculously watered down and so ineffective as martial arts go that it just doesn't work. And I've trained both ways. I've trained kids hardcore. I've trained kids super soft, and there's a middle ground that I believe works really, really well. And one of the challenges that I think a lot of people have with my version of teaching children is I err a little bit more on the high expectation side. And here's what I mean. If you bring a child to me and you tell me whatever the kids can't do, they can't do push-ups, they can't remember their name, they can't put a string of words together for a sentence, like, whatever, I'm pretty much going to ignore you. And what I mean by that is I'm going to assume that your child is an amazing rock star and is a gifted martial arts athlete. And I'm going to keep that assumption going until your child proves otherwise. So I assume when the kids come out there that they are totally capable of doing whatever we're going to ask them to do. And by doing that, I have found that most of the time the kids are totally capable of doing everything we ask them to do. Now, obviously, some kids are more in shape than others. Some are more athletic than others. Some are more coordinated. That's totally fine. What I have found is one of the surest ways to ensure, that's a lot of sures, one of the most effective ways to ensure that your child will be an underachiever is to assume that your child is an underachiever. And when you take that tack, that's when you get really crappy quality execution. And you get, again, when the 90s came around with this really kid-friendly type curriculums and structure, instructors found out that if the kids are having fun and they're happy and the parents are happy and nobody's being overly challenged and no one's ever getting hurt, that people will pay a lot of money for that. And the reality is, in this country, martial arts is a luxury. We really aren't that violent. You aren't fighting for your life daily. You're not having to defeat other gangs of children to recover scraps in the streets from dumpsters. So there's really never the odds that your child will need actual martial arts skills to protect him or herself is really, really, really low. And even if there is an altercation, it's generally not a high intensity, life-threatening one, which is good. That's good. That's a good thing. So anyway, so kids went through years of training and got their black belts and second degrees and third, whatever it is, and they won 1 million trophies and they got a ton of ribbons and they got a bazillion stripes and patches and badges and I went through 18 different colors of uniforms as they graduated levels. And again, I'm not saying all that's good or bad. That's just kind of what happened. But if the bar is set low, then everybody's going to be a rock star in their mind. And that's, I think, I don't believe in that. So my philosophy is that I expect your child to be able to do everything I ask of him or of her. And if and when, or both, they cannot achieve that standard, that's when we have to step in and maybe give them a little extra help. Now, as an instructor, if I have 20 kids in class and only 2 of them are able to execute what I'm asking, then that tells me that the level that I am introducing the material at is too difficult or it's formulated wrong. If I have 20 kids in class and 16 of them are able to adequately do what I ask, then that means the curriculum is right on point because there's a bell curve. Some kids are super athletic and going to pick up everything quickly, and there's going to be some kids that are going to struggle and fall behind. And that's okay. I'll never forget one time I was at a martial arts business seminar led by a very famous martial arts practitioner that if you've been in the business for 20 or 30 years, you know exactly who it was. And we were talking about a thing called rotating curriculum, which is, without getting too much on a tangent, basically, rather than everything being, you got to learn this move and then this move, basically, okay, all these moves are at this level, we can teach them in any order. That's kind of how it works. Obviously, you're not teaching, third year moves in first year class, but it'd be like if I have a chemistry 101 course in college and an English 101, it doesn't really matter which one I do first. They're both 101 level classes. That's kind of how it works. Anyway, so the question was posed and said, well, if you have a child who does not pass the exam for this rotating curriculum, should you hold back the level or what? He's like, well, I'm going to move him up anyway. It's basically give him the reward of rank and just make sure that we get him caught up later. Now, that's not necessarily a terrible idea if there's a methodology in place to ensure that happens, but it isn't usually happens. So what happens is kids just get moved along. I call it the paycheck and heartbeat. If the parents, I'm not paid the checkbook and heartbeat. So the parents have a checkbook, which nobody uses checks anymore. They paid the testing fee or the advancement fee or the monthly tuition, and the kid had a heartbeat and he showed up and they passed. I don't think that's a good idea. I think that's actually, I would rather have kids fail at a higher rate, and maybe even end up quitting the academy if they don't actually hit the standards, than have a large number of kids moving up just because they would feel bad if they did not. And I've had kids who did not pass a test and actually their parents pulled them out of school. They're like, oh, well, this isn't for him or her, and they'll go to a school where basically belts are bought. Again, and that's not always the case. Sometimes it just isn't a good fit, and that's okay. Not everybody has to love you, and not everybody's gonna love your style. Anyway, so my personal philosophy is I believe every kid is capable of doing what I ask of him or her until he or she proves otherwise. That's how I look at it. And this is how, over the years, I've had so many parents tell me, like, wow, I can't believe my kid can do this. Well, that's kind of why your kid can't do this, because maybe no one has really had that belief. And I'm not telling that parents can't do this, because if you have kids and they do activities, you're well aware that your kids will behave and differently with a different authority figure than you. That's just the way. My kids are no exceptions. I mean, so it is what it is. But I want to make sure I do my best to bring out the best in a child as they train. So I'm going to assume the best. And again, unless I have a reason to believe otherwise, that's how I roll. That might be too much. There have been many times over the years. I wouldn't say many times, but there's been more than a few times where, a child just isn't able to do what I expect. Now, if it's left up to the kid, generally speaking, they will continue until they get it right. But sometimes the parents like going, "Oh, my kid's not having fun. My kid was disappointed. They didn't make this stripe test or belt exam, or they didn't qualify for a competition team or whatever it was, and now their feelings are hurt. So we're going to take them out of class because I don't want them to be sad." And I think, without getting too far off in my own personal philosophy, I think that's a huge factor of where we have problems in society. Is people are so afraid of bringing out the truth, and they'd rather give them the comfortable lie. Oh yeah, your kid didn't remember any of his material, and he had no energy on test. So in my world, that means he would not pass. However, that would make him feel bad. So, by golly, we can't have that. Let's just pass him anyway. So, that is something I don't want to have happen. So I am willing and able, if a child or an adult does not meet the standard, they will not pass. It doesn't mean they don't give another opportunity. It doesn't mean that we, basically kick them out of the academy. It just means that on that day, at that time, the standard was not met, whether it's their intensity, whether it's their knowledge of material, or whatever the problem is, the standard was not met, and therefore they do not advance. That's just all it means. Okay, so hope that makes sense, guys. That is Coach Johnson's philosophy on kids in martial arts. Obviously, I'm not as hardcore with the kids as I am with my adult Krav Maga students, because the stakes are different. And honestly, I've had many adults over the years get fed up and quit because the class was hard and they didn't pass a test, or they didn't know their stuff, or the demands we placed upon them were too hard. That's okay. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with having someone who's not a good fit not be there. I believe there is a problem of making the requirements and the expectations so low that the students aren't really internalizing what they're learning. And this is not just martial arts. This could be chess club. It could be, badminton, whatever. I don't like giving a false sense of security, and I don't like the comfortable lie. Okay, I like the uncomfortable truth if necessary. If I'm training and my coach says, "Hey, you know what? You're just not getting it." I'd rather hear that than go, "Yeah, you know what? It's all good. It's all good. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and pass you anyway, even though you messed everything up." That's me. So, Coach Jay out. If you found value in this, give me a like, subscribe to the channel, share it with somebody, and make sure that you spend your time training, being happier, healthier, harder to kill. Coach Jay out.